recap the 49ers versus Rams Week 2 matchup. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say the Niners, they won 30-23, right? They won by 7, I know that. But the game was a very close game up until a couple moments. There was the moment where it looked like the Rams were going to drive down the field and maybe score another touchdown to put them ahead. But Stafford, he throws it to Kyren Williams, and it bounces off of Kyren Williams' hands, and Isaiah Oliver is able to one-hand it, a one-hand interception, and that was really the turning point in the game. It was a very, very close game, and I'm honestly impressed with the Rams. I think that they have, in my opinion, reloaded. I don't think they're like fool's gold. I think they're going to be a legit team that's not going to go away anytime soon. So I wouldn't be shocked if at the end of the year, it's the 49ers and the Rams that are fighting for the West. We're going to have to play them at least one other time. And I think by the time that we play them again, Cooper Kupp theoretically should be back from his injury. So the Niners gave up 15 catches for what was it? 15 catches for 147 yards, but no touchdowns to Puka Nacua, the rookie. And Tutu Atwell had 7 catches for 77 yards. So the Rams were able to pass the ball. The only thing about the Rams, though, that always seems to be the detriment of Matthew Stafford is he is very good at pushing the ball downfield and leading very efficient like drives with a lot of passes downfield. But he just has those plays in the game where it's just like, man, that killed your team, like a boneheaded mistake. He threw an interception also late in the game to Diamador Lenore, who also played very well. And so the Rams sort of just coughed up the game on their own. But the Niners on the offensive side of the ball, they came to play. I said in the fantasy football group chat that I have with Mike and a couple other friends, I said that this was Purdy's worst game so far, but Purdy has set such a high bar for himself. Like, I think that it was his worst game only because the body language to me looked a little bit different. I think maybe if you want to be like in actuality of when his worst game was, it was probably against Dallas in the playoffs. And then we didn't really get to see what he looked like against the Eagles in the playoffs. But Purdy missed like, what was it, 3 or 4 like deep throws that 2 of them would have been like for sure touchdowns. One was to Ayuk, and I was devastated because I started Ayuk in fantasy, but I ended up winning anyway. So, it's all good in that regard. But I am kind of nitpicking Brock Purdy too, saying that this was his worst game as well, because the offense put up 30 points. Like, he's not going to be out here slinging it. I will say at the times where he did miss, the game was still close. Like, it was a close game throughout. And I feel like it's what the Niners have been missing from this offense is like the deep ball. And I feel like they sort of had something brewing with Trey Lance on that regard, but Trey Lance was like the exact opposite, where he would hit the deep balls, but maybe was a little bit more inconsistent on the shorter stuff that Brock Purdy was, is able to. I mean, Brock is lights out when it comes to like reading the defense and knowing where to throw the ball and finding the open receiver literally on practically every play. He almost completed 70% of his passes. Like, Brock did well. He didn't look like how he did in week 1, and they scored like, a similar amount of points.
Yeah, he had his worst statistical game, but it really was just a matter of the touchdowns weren't there. Like, he usually passes for 2 touchdowns and might have a rushing touchdown as well. In this game, he only had the rushing touchdown.
on a QB sneak.
Yeah, so he was fine. It wasn't like he threw a bunch of picks and lost the game for you guys. It was just statistically, it wasn't what it usually is, and that's fine. I mean, he's started enough games now where you should expect one or two of those, like, oh well, it didn't work out for him statistically, but McCaffrey had a touchdown, and this guy had a touchdown, and that guy had a touchdown, and or our defense got a touchdown or whatever, and you still won by 10 points and you scored 30. So, did he underperform? Not really.
To
It's just that
his standards, yes.
statistically, sure, but he still was able to lead the team to a win, and that's all that matters. So, I mean,
and I would say slightly. I would say he slightly underperformed because he still played very well, and the offense put up 30 points. So, like, literally, you could just chalk it up to me, like, if I am questioning Brock, like, it's just me kind of bitching about it. Like, I want him to make the throws that I feel like he should make, and I've seen what a missed deep throw can do to this 49ers team, late in a playoff game, right? We saw it in 2019. I hate to remind everybody of that, but hopefully, I mean, ideally the 49ers are going to be so good and so efficient that they're not going to allow another deep playoff game / Super Bowl to come to a deep throw. Hopefully the 49ers can find themselves to continue to be in positions where they don't have to. I mean, they can just continue to play to their strengths. But, as for the rest of the team, like I said, they scored 30 points. Debo had 1 or 2 touchdowns. Hold on, let me look it up. Let me not just be lazy and say 1 or 2 touchdowns. Debo had, Debo had 1 touchdown, and then McCaffrey had a touchdown. And where did all? Oh, and Purdy also had a touchdown too. So, did Jake Moody really kick that many field goals? Let me take a quick look. Let's see.
Was there Jake ever Moody, a 2-point conversion?
I don't think so, but Jake Moody had 12 points. So 12 plus 24, that's... No, hold on. I'm getting numbers mixed up. 12 plus 3 touchdowns, so... It's so late, I'm not doing math correctly. Mike, why aren't I doing math? Oh, okay, hold on. That's why. I'm getting confused right now because Jake Moody's extra points are tacked on to the touchdowns. I was like, 7 times 3 is 21, and then Jake Moody's got 12. I'm like, where the fuck did I go wrong there? Yeah, no. So Jake Moody's got 9 points off of field goals, and then you got the 21 from the other touchdowns. That's why I was like, I am not computing this correctly. So I'm sorry at home. I do have a college degree, but apparently I didn't study hard enough. At least not in elementary school, because that's what this is. But so Debo played pretty well. It was another Debo game. And honestly, every time the 49ers play against the Rams, we can probably expect that Debo is just going to have a big game because he is the Rams killer. And I don't think he likes the Rams. And, it's just every single time his number gets called and he fucks him up every time. McCaffrey he got every single carry, which is a little bit alarming because I would want Kyle Shanahan to maybe, when you're trying to salt away the game, the Niners have other also excellent running backs like Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Ty Davis Price. You would like to see it, at least Elijah Mitchell also get involved and maybe lighten the load on McCaffrey because you're playing a 17-game season and looking to save McCaffrey for February. But, the Niners won the game. The only injury that I seem to have off the top of my head was Brandon Ayuk was playing banged up. He was suffering like with a little bit of a shoulder injury, or it could have been a stinger, but Ayuk might not play on Thursday. And I guess we'll talk about that in the Niners versus Giants thing, but I don't think it'll be a huge factor in that game because I think the Niners are stacked and are going to beat the shit out of the Giants. But let's see. I would have liked to see the defense maybe not give up as much slack to Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell, but they got the job done and made the adjustments they needed to at halftime in order to turn the ball over. But I will say, I don't know if the adjustments are as apparent had Kyron Williams just not had the check down slip out of his hands and go straight into Isaiah Oliver's hands. It's a completely different ball game if the Rams go up there and it's just like continues to be a shootout. Like what it was looking like.
Under the assumption that interception turned into points for the Niners and the Rams ended the game on a field goal, which was very odd to me. And then I found out later that the Vegas money line, or whatever you call that, was at exactly a 7 point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of a interesting move by the Rams because there were 4 seconds left. Like if there were 8 seconds, I get it because maybe you kick it, 4 seconds roll off, 4 seconds are left. You kick an onside kick, you somehow get it, no time goes, you get one Hail Mary. That makes sense. But when it's down 4, try to go for the touchdown. I just don't get the field goal attempt. But anyways, until I found that out, then I understood. But assuming that the Niners went and got points off of that interception, if you think to yourself, if the Rams went and got a touchdown instead, and you take away at least 3 points from the Niners, that's the end of that's the difference at the end of the game. That 7 points, or really the Rams came into that last play with a 10-point differential. So if you take away, let's say 3 from the Niners and you add 7 to the Rams, that's your 10-point differential. Like that was a huge play in the game, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So the Niners took care of business and they packed out SoFi Stadium. And we were talking about it earlier, how the Niners fans travel so well. And it's not just in LA. They travel pretty well most places.
Do they always, you think?
At least for the past couple of years they have. So like you said, the recent success has definitely played a good part in it. But the Niners have a pretty their fan base is everywhere. And I would say the Raider fan base is kind of similar too, because I've traveled to different places and I've seen, Raider gear in like the most randomest places. Like,
oh yeah.
But I've also seen Niner gear in the most randomest places too. So
that's definitely a thing for the Raiders. I asked the question because I do remember, like in the post Kaepernick and Harbaugh or whatever years, early on in the Levi Stadium, maybe it was 2017. Maybe that was first year with Shanahan, and it was like looking real bad at first. Brian Hoyer type days. Like that stadium was not getting filled. I do remember the pictures of Levi Stadium like lacking in fans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just carrying on from my point of when your team's winning, they're going to show up, whether it's in Baltimore, LA, Vegas, Buffalo. It doesn't matter. Your fans are going to show up. When your team's not winning, they're not going to show up, and I don't blame them. That's why I'm not going to games. At least I'm not going to fork up $600 to do so.
Mm-hmm. And then that's one thing I want to credit Raider fans with is like literally my entire life the Raiders have like sucked, and still the Oakland Coliseum was getting sold out, like consistently.
For the most part. There was a point.
Well, you were there, so tell us.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point where right before Jamarcus Russell was like on his last year with the Raiders, like they were not selling out, and the games were getting blacked out, from local television because they weren't selling out. Um, and I remember that probably went into like 2009. And then I think 2010 it started to change where every single game was sold out and did not black out. And then that ran until what, 2018, 19 in Oakland, whatever was the final year. Um, yeah, and I mean, yeah, to your point, Oakland fans were special in my opinion, and just like the A's now, they're having their teams ripped from them, and it's stupid. But we should get back to the Niners.
Yeah. But I will say those pictures. There's one in particular that's probably the one you're referring to, where it shows like the meme font with like every single year, and it's got like empty crowds, and then it goes to like, oh, the Niners 2019 to 20, let's just say 2023 now. Um, those pictures I feel like are a little bit exaggerated, and people have taken those pictures like before all the fans were able to fill in the seats, because you know if you look at the attendance records, or I don't know if those go based off of tickets sold,
I
but
think that's part of it. I think that they were a lot of season tickets that were sold and were not resold.
mhm,
And the people that owned the tickets just didn't go.
yeah. And then so it was a new stadium, and it was a really bad time for the 49ers, because they let go of Jim Harbaugh and lost like every single fucking good player that they had on their team except for Kaepernick. And then they switched it over to Jim Tomsula, who was the defensive line coach, and he was not cut out to be a head coach in the NFL. So it was a mistake to promote him in the first place. I'm not saying Tomsula was like, a bad football coach, like, to specialize on defensive line, but as a head coach, I've heard stories. It was just a mess. And then they move on from Tom Sula after 1 year, because they found out, he wasn't the one. And then they gave the reins over to Chip Kelly, and it was like at least a 3-year contract. And then literally it was Chip Kelly and the, I mean, I was on I was like in support of Kaepernick's protests, like, but you had that going on, and it was like, it was it was just a huge like media, um, sort like, it was a distraction by the media. I don't think it was a distraction in the locker room, because Chip Kelly said it wasn't, but then again, he could just be covering for the team. And it's neither here nor there whether you're in support of what Kaepernick did or not. That's not really the main point that we're talking about here. But there was just a lot of stuff to deter people from actually focusing on the football that was being played on the field. And the ticket prices were still, in the like around the Chip Kelly time. I feel like they didn't get cheap until the end of the year, because they were just like, they were so bad. And Jed York's over here trying to pay off a brand new $1 billion stadium. So I do remember going to my first Niner game with my uncle, which was actually Kaepernick's last game. And I don't know how much my uncle paid for the tickets. And I don't even know if he would remember, but ticket prices also like have something to do with it. But
And who was that game against?
the Seahawks, and there were a lot of Seahawks fans there. So, but I wouldn't say there were more Seahawks fans than Niner fans. There were still plenty of Niner fans, just very upset ones, and they even flew a blimp over the stadium. Like it said something along the lines of, "This was the house that Harbaugh built." Just sort of against like the front office, for getting rid of Harbaugh. Because
Yeah.
even I, like, to this day, I still get pissed that, like, you fucking let go of Jim Harbaugh. I
Mm.
really felt like at the time Jim Harbaugh was the best coach in the NFL. I really had like full and complete faith. And yeah, I learned years later that Harbaugh had lost the locker room, but that we're bringing up old stuff. We've got Kyle Shanahan now, and the Niners are in a much better spot. And I think that their attendance, it won't see a dip unless they do the same thing and get rid of Shanahan after, not even having a losing season. Although I do sort of feel like Shanahan has to have that urgency to win a Super Bowl now, or he could be on the hot seat. Because he's in year 7 right now, right? But I'm gonna get to a couple comments, and then we'll move on to our predictions and our preview for the Niners versus the Giants. Then we're gonna get out of here. But Fonzie says maybe they were his first true challenge. Maybe I think he's referring to the Rams. I would say the Cowboys were Purdy's first like real challenge, and they didn't put up 30 points in that game. So yeah. Fonzie also says, talking about Levi Stadium, adding to it, it was out of the way and it wasn't in San Francisco anymore. So Levi Stadium is much further from San Francisco than Candlestick Point was. Candlestick Point was still technically in SF.
What's the point of what were we talking about?
Of why people weren't going to games. Like, they moved the San Francisco 49ers out of San Francisco, and they moved them to Great America's parking lot. And the parking situation was not like, it was a mess to like get in and out.
Yeah, but I think as a Raider fan, I would much rather have my team in Santa Clara. As a Bay Area, Oakland Raider fan, I would much rather have my team with traffic 45 minutes south, and it's some shitty traffic, especially going southbound, and then post-game northbound is not fun either, but I would much rather take that and have them hold the name of Oakland Raiders than move to Vegas and now have $600 tickets. But granted, I think to this point, you get a shiny new stadium. I don't care if it isn't state of the art. I don't care if it's 30, 45 minutes from San Francisco, an hour away from the titled titular city. It's still the Bay Area's team.
I'm glad you said that.
In the Bay Area, it's still a Bay Arean team that, now, they are, it's whatever, but, just, I don't see how that's going to make a difference unless you live north of San Francisco and it was convenient to go to San Francisco. And now it's like, well, shit, now it's adding literally a full hour to my already 30-minute drive. Then I get it. But, I think the issue at the time was that the team fucking sucked. And that happens. That happens to the Raiders a lot. And we have a brand new stadium and we see our house get filled with red or purple or whatever color, because our team isn't there yet. And the seats are getting resold to the max bidder, which is usually going to be a fan that's saying, man, why don't I take our buddies out or the wife out and go to Vegas, of all places in the country, have a fun weekend because I know what I can do out there. Whereas if I go to Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C., I know what to do out there. But let's say
Jacksonville.
Good example, yes. Like Jacksonville, or even a team like Cleveland. Baltimore. Cleveland, yeah. Cleveland, you could go to the Hall of Fame, I guess, if you really are into the NFL that hardcore. But, it's like, okay, it's a city, but what is really out there? Whereas Vegas, it's like, that's an attraction. Okay, New York, yeah. But, there's only so many cities that you're going to go to and be like, okay, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. Vegas is one of those cities where it's just, you're going to have fun the whole time. And I think if your team is playing there, you're going to want to look into going. But then you're going to look at the ticket prices and you might say, oh, never mind. So when your team, the home team that's selling tickets for $600, third deck, is not favored to win in the game, you're probably going to reconsider whether or not you want to go. Whereas the team, like a Ravens fan, is saying, "Wow, we're favored by 7. Yeah, let's go to Vegas. Let's have some fun."
Mm. Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say is, they moved it out of San Francisco, and that's where the 49ers have always been, and that's where they belong. And I hope that one day they move back, because I mean, it would just be great to be able to spend a day in San Francisco and then catch a football game there. Like, I feel like that sounds like a great time, as opposed to, yeah, let me sit in the Silicon Valley traffic. People getting off of work. Well, I guess on Sundays is mainly when they play, but it's a drive. There's not many other ways to get there besides, there's Amtrak, and then there's driving, and then also the parking situation there. They're in Great America's parking lot, but they just charge way too much for parking, dude. Like,
Yeah,
they charge
I
a
think
lot
the
for parking, and it was more back then.
yeah, I think the best way to. I mean, for one thing, do they even allow tailgating in the
Yeah,
parking? Okay.
yeah.
So I mean, yeah, parking, it can be worth it if you bring a bunch of people and such, but I think the best way to get to a Niner game is probably the Amtrak. Um, it's just a matter of when the game ends, you need to make sure that you get
Yeah,
to
because
the
the train will leave, and that will
yeah
be the last train of the day. So it's not very convenient to get to
yeah
Levi's. There's not a lot of options, and I hope that they move Bart out there, or eventually the Niners, let's just say 20 years from now, decide, hey, we want to move back to San Francisco. They can find a good plot of land to build a state-of-the-art stadium.
yeah
And maybe they could even recycle materials that they used from Levi's, because it's not that old, but I'm sure that they would just want to start fresh if they're going to build a new one anyway.
yeah. We would probably have grandkids by the time they consider that. To be honest with you,
Mhm,
unless Levi's really starts diminishing in the next 20 to 30 years, but
mhm.
I don't see it. You know.
Well, here's what I'll say. Uh, I've heard Levi's referred to this, and I like Levi's Stadium. You know what I mean? It's got its own charm to it, where a lot of modern stadiums feel like they're uh, I mean, they feel very similar to one another, and Levi's is definitely like doing something different. But I've heard this said about Levi's, and I don't disagree with it. So the I want to say it was Grant Cohn that said this, but Levi Stadium is the worst $1 billion, or like the worst brand new stadium in the NFL,
Mm,
and I can't disagree with that. Like, I can't think of another example of another brand new stadium that has the flaws that Levi's has,
yeah.
or at least
Fon-
didn't innovate like Levi's didn't.
mm. Fonzie has another good couple of comments too.
Yeah, and then I just want to say too, you pile up like the price of parking, the inconvenience of it being somewhere else, and also in their first season in Levi's, they went 8-8, missed the playoffs, and then fired their head coach, who had went to 3 straight NFC championships and a Super Bowl right before that, and then half the team was fucking gone. Like, who wants to go see that?
Yeah.
So, that's what I'll say about that. But let's see. Jamarcus Russell's last year was his first year. Yeah. And then Crabtree, did Crabtree leave that season? No, he left probably the season after. Went to the Raiders in 2016.
The season after what? The Niners' first year with the. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was probably one of those guys who left very soon after Harbaugh.
Yeah, I don't think it was the season that Harbaugh left, though.
Yeah.
Um, I think he went about it the wrong way. I feel like if he were to have gone public first, maybe. Oh, okay. Are you talking about Kaepernick?
Yeah, Kaepernick's the only guy I can think of being. Yeah, he's probably talking about Kaepernick because he just started kneeling immediately without any. Or actually, I think the first game he sat.
He sat.
He didn't. Yeah, he didn't kneel or nothing. He just Pledge of Allegiance, and he was sitting on a cooler, and it was like, what the fuck is this? And it popped up on Twitter, and then it was like, oh, I'm taking a stand against social injustice, and it's like, yeah, no, Fonzie's right. He should have said something first because when that
the first
came out on
impression,
ESPN, it was like, oh, he knows he's getting benched. He's pouting. He's pissed off about something. I think Blaine Gabbert might have been starting at that point. I don't know. I remember at some point Blaine Gabbert was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was Gabbert
he was
starting?
The starter. He was the starter for like the first couple games of the season, and then Kaepernick took back over because Chip Kelly just took over as head coach, and Kaepernick was coming off the shoulder surgery.
Yeah, and that was always in the back of my head. I'll admit that about Kaepernick.
Definitely, I never considered that the first impression, if Kaepernick didn't go public with it and then talked about it after, to where it could have rubbed people the wrong way. So I never considered that point. Fonzie also says, I don't like nor hate the Raiders. The rivalry is long gone. Sucks that it means little to the rivalry aspect of it. I guess, with the Raiders moving to Vegas.
Yeah,
I still think the rivalry's there.
I mean, it definitely is with Bay Area fans, but give it 50 years and it might be completely faded away. There'll be still people that will hold on to it, but a lot of people at that point in the world will not think of that. They'll be like, Dad, what are you talking about? The Raiders are in Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, it'll be like when I was growing up and I'm like, yeah, I fucking hate the Seahawks. That's our rival. And then you just, have all the Niner fans who have been through it. Nah, fuck the Rams. Fuck the Cowboys. It's kind of like that where you'll have fans who are too young to remember all the great rivalries.
Mm-hmm.
Fonzie said, I'd rather drive down the 80 straight to SF. Levi's, you got to drive down the 99, then to the 80 and hit hella traffic coming from SAC. Yeah. Oh, and the horrible shading. That's probably the worst part about Levi Stadium is that they can't even. Yeah, somebody had a heat stroke and died in that warm California sun, especially like the SoCal sun.
Yeah.
I mean, not SoCal. South Bay. The South Bay sun.
Yeah.
They can't add a retractable ceiling into it. They can't build it any higher because they're right next to the airport. And I don't think they legally can. And Fonzie clarifies he was talking about Kaepernick. He didn't talk about it afterwards. He acted, then got questioned. Mm-hmm. It's hard to have a rivalry against a team that has no connection to us anymore. Yeah, I still think hopefully the fans will keep that rivalry alive because it's one of the great ones. And, definitely I know with this show we're trying to bridge the gap between the rivalry, but it's still fun to play around and, shit talk each other and, stuff like that. It's sports. We're carrying the tradition.
Yeah, it'll carry on for sure, but it will never be the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So shake my hand. Shake my hand, huh? Let's keep this rivalry going, huh?